Everybody, welcome to day 2 of the leadership diagnostics for week 1. I am My name is Sean. I am the business mechanic. The tagline is, if your vehicle was to break down, who are we going to take it to? We are going to take it to our mechanic. If we are mowing and our Briggs and Stratton breaks down, who are we going to take it to? We're going to take it to our mechanic. The same with business. Business has the same mindset. If our business breaks down, who are we taking our business to? Usually not a mechanic by term, but we are taking it to somebody. We are either phoning a friend, um, we're leaning on other business owners. Sorry. We're leaning on other business owners, or in some cases, there are people that are part of a big group of other like business owners, and they have different things that they offer to help with their business of sort. So, if you're not a part of those groups, who are you calling on? And even to be a part of those groups, it usually costs a significant amount of money to be a part of them. And the more help you need, the more it's going to cost you. That's where guys like myself come in. We are guys that come in, we diagnose your business, we look over your business, and we put together a formative plan for you to go step by step in whatever the situation may be, to either regain power, form better leadership, increase profits, etc., etc. So, with that being said, we are now on day 2. As you can see, this is communication and accountability equals trust. This is a 2-day series within this week. So when we take communication and we add it with accountability, we get trust. And why does trust matter? Trust determines whether people follow you or just comply. Communication and accountability are the two levers that create trust. Without trust, performance becomes inconsistent and emotional. Now, if you remember in some of my other talks, I talk about how people will make an emotional decision. And 99%, I don't want to say 99% of the time, that's exaggerating, but 85% of the time, when somebody makes a decision that is based off of emotion, a lot of times that decision is going to be the wrong decision because it was made based off of emotion. It wasn't made off of anything calculated. Um, and that can be very unfortunate for people. So, understanding that, we have what we call the trust equation. And that trust equation is exactly what was just said at the beginning of this. It is communication plus accountability equals trust. When one is missing, trust collapses. When both are strong, teams perform without. Okay. And what that means is if we don't have good communication, we can't really hold anybody accountable. Like what in a lot of cases, what happens in many situations, you will have a boss or a micromanager that will come in, they will make a decision for you, and then they will hold you accountable to the decision that they made. So there's no communication, but there's a lot of accountability. Well, that doesn't give any trust, right? So now, anytime you are working with that individual, you have no trust in them because they're holding you accountable for something that they did. And then on top of that, they don't give you the latitude to work within the decision they made for you. So it becomes a stronghold and there's no trust whatsoever. So, starting with that, communication, that's the leader's responsibility, just like what I just said. Clarity reduces confusion and emotional reactions. Consistency builds confidence. Transparency eliminates assumptions. And communication is not what you say, it's what they receive. Now, each one of these are extremely important. Clarity reduces confusion and emotional reactions. What that means, if you are coming in as a leader and you are giving a direction, but you're not clear about the direction, then people get confused, they get agitated, and then they start having emotional reactions. So, like when you come out, and if you're a leader and you come out and you just basically set everything out in front of them and you just say, okay, now it's up to you with no clear explanation, then people who are not in leadership roles, they reduce to what form is easiest, and that's the emotional reaction to it. So when they have an emotional reactions, that's when everything will go south fast. Then on top of that, if you are consistently providing clear and precise instruction, you eliminate emotional reactions. And now you are having a team that is running very cohesively. And let's say you don't communicate at the best. How easy is it for your employees to communicate back to you? It's a very important piece as well. So now transparency eliminates assumptions. So a lot of times what will happen is a boss or a micromanager will come in and will give you 10 steps, but leave 3 steps out of there because they don't want to share those pieces because they may be quote unquote confidential. Well, if you are putting a piece together for your team to accomplish a task, but you're afraid to communicate some of it, you're gonna run into some brick walls, either fairly quickly or at the worst place at the end. And the reason a brick wall at the end is the worst place is because you will do all of this work and then you'll hit the end and hit the brick wall. And that's where you start doing a lot of the same things twice. So that's why communication is not always what you say, but it's what they receive. And that means clear instructions. If you're not clear with the instructions, then they're not going to be clear with the work that they provide you. Now, on the flip side, if you're an employee and you don't understand something, by all means, raise your hand and ask. And a true leader will not reprimand you for that. A true leader will actually encourage you to ask questions. And in some cases, it may be I'm sorry, I got a phone call right in the middle of that. So, and it's not so much what you say, it's what they receive. And what that means is like what I'm saying is if you're an employee and you don't raise your hands to ask the question, then you're not going to have the clear answer. So therefore, you're going to have some emotional reactions on your part. Now, on the flip side, a good manager should welcome any of those questions and good constructive criticism. Right? So we want to make sure that all pieces of that are one, the employee is open to ask questions and the employer is open to receive those questions. Now, the accountability part. This is where the performance engine happens, right? Accountability is not punishment. I repeat, accountability is not punishment. It's alignment, expectations, and follow through. High trust teams expect accountability. Low trust teams fear it. Now, if you're a low trust team, why would you suspect they would be fearing it? 9 times out of 10, it's because they have either what I coin as an actual boss or a micromanager, because they're fearful of going out on their own a little bit to make the work probably better or work alongside or anything. Because when you have a micromanager that comes in, your teams are extremely low. They have extreme low trust for micromanagers, which we'll go into more on day 4. I got a whole series on coaching versus micromanagement. Now, high trust teams expect accountability. And what that means is when you have a high trust team, you have a lot of your A players out there working for the same goal. And those individuals expect accountability not only for themselves, but for their teammates. Because if everybody is held accountable the same, everybody can work cohesively together and they will all reach the same goal. Now, what some leaders will mistake accountability for is they will pick somebody out of the group and hold them accountable for something totally different. When in fact, they probably need to go and review the group and understand the communication with inside the group. And again, I remind you, accountability is not punishment. If it is punishment, then you as a leader need to go back and relearn the definition of accountability. Because if we're punishing people when we're holding them accountable, you're always going to have a low trust team. Always. Because they fear it. Because when accountability turns into punishment, your team starts to become low trust. Right? And in a lot of cases, like I started off this segment about, was in some scenarios, you'll have a boss and a micromanager. And real quick on a side note, you'll start to hear me reference boss and micromanagers different from actual leaders, because I don't believe in boss and micromanagers. I'm more about the person as a leader. Okay, so going back to that, if accountability is now turning into punishment, you are going to have low trust teams because of that. Right? Now, if you're holding somebody accountable just for constructive criticism to basically find a better solution at the goal they're trying to get to, then that's fine. Then accountability is welcomed. But if you are making, like I said before, when you're making decisions for people and you're holding them accountable for your decision, and then you turn that into punishment, you lose your trust. So make sure that when you are providing I guess when you are approaching your team with a subject or a job that needs to be done, make sure you are clearly communicating that and you are clearly holding everybody accountable, but don't turn accountability into actual punishment. So here's where the communication gap comes in. 2 boxes labeled, what I said and what they heard. Caption, your job as a leader is to close this gap. Now, if you ask yourself, what does that mean? What is your definition of this? What this usually means is if they heard something different versus what you actually supposedly said, why do you suppose that would be? Right? If you have a team and they're not doing the task at hand correctly, all right, and you go and you ask them and they're like, well, this, and this, and you're like, well, that's not what I said. And they're like, well, of course that's what you said. That is the fault of both sides. That's the fault of the employee not asking questions, and that's the employer not verifying that everybody understands the task at hand. So what happens in so many cases, a boss or a manager will come out, they'll bark the order, and then that's it, and then off they go. Then they expect you to just fill the gaps, right? And that's where this communication gap comes in. Now, the accountability loop, right? Set clear expectations, confirm everybody understands, inspect what you expect, coach, correct, reinforce, repeat consistently, and accountability without consistency is just noise. And that is so very true. Because if we want to hold people accountable, we have to be consistent with that accountability. And what that means is if I'm going to hold Lacey accountable for this, I need to also hold Steve accountable for the exact same thing. So I have to be consistent in that, right? Because what happens in a lot of cases in business world, small, large, and alike, is we will hold people accountable different by seniority levels. And that is, do not do that. Because if you want to lose the trust of new employees, hold people more accountable versus people who've been there longer. That is so unfair. And I absolutely dislike when leaders do that. So that's why if you want to keep trust within your group, with you and amongst themselves, you need to be consistent with the accountability. And there's no deviation from that. So now, how is trust built daily? Trust is built daily. You say what you mean, you follow through on commitments, you address issues early, you communicate changes immediately, and you model the behavior you expect. Right? These are so very true. So if you are going to say something, mean it. Don't just be saying things to just be saying it. And you want to follow through on commitments. The fastest way to lose trust in individuals and employees is don't follow through on your commitments. One thing about me, if anybody has ever worked with me or worked for me or will ever work for me or work with me, you will always know and you will start to see I never say the two words I promise. And there's a reason for that. Is because if I have to promise something, that means I'm not doing something. I don't promise, I just do. And a lot of times, if you promise, that's when Murphy's Law will always come in and kick you right in the butt. And what that means is as soon as you promise something, inevitably, I cannot say that word, so I apologize. It is going to happen. Meaning, I'm going to promise you $20, but inevitably, I'm going to have a bill come due that's going to take $10. Now, I promised you 20, but I can only give you 10. Right? But if I would just have just done it and not promised it, I would have gave you 10 today and 10 in 2 days, and you still would have got your $20, and we wouldn't have had any disconnect in our communication. Address issues early. This one is extremely important. And this one, I even learned so much. I learned this from my father from years ago. Being the youngest of a large family, you will see the decisions your older brothers and sisters make, and you see the reaction of your parents. And one of the one reaction that I learned very quickly was, don't wait until mom and dad find out. Just address it right away. Get it over with. So if something comes up or something happens, or you need to have a hard conversation with an employer or an employee, do it as fast as you can. Do it early and don't wait. And communicate changes immediately. If you make a change or you have to deviate from any task, communicate that with your employer and with your teammates. Communicate that, because if you and only a couple other people know about the change, then I don't even have to say it. You know what's going to happen next. And then model the behavior you expect. This is an old adage that basically says, if you want to lead, you have to lead by example. And don't become the one, what is it is. Don't do as I say, just do as I do, or whatever that crazy saying is. Okay. Now, diagnostic questions for leaders out there. Okay. Do my people always know what I expect? Do I follow up consistently? Do I communicate changes clearly and quickly? Do I avoid difficult conversations? And do I model accountability myself? I'll give you here a couple seconds to write those questions down. And you may not want all of them, but I would challenge you to write down a couple of them. So I'll give you about 30 seconds of silence here to write those questions down. Why you get a drink of water. I'm still here. Okay. That was about 25, 30 seconds to write those questions down. And if you don't get any of these written down and you want to know about them later, by all means, just DM me and I'll be more than happy to share this PowerPoint with you. So the leadership challenge for today, looks like it got cut off. Choose one conversation today where you'll practice clear communication and communicate any changes that there may be. And examples, if you have to reset any expectations, clarify any misunderstandings, or follow up on any commitments, by all means, let's do that. So again, ask yourself these questions. Do my people always know what I expect? Do I follow up consistently? Do I avoid difficult conversations? Do I model accountability myself? Okay, so in closing for today, just a quick for tomorrow's preview, day 3, systems create freedom. And that's how we structure eliminates chaos and accelerates performance. That is the day 2 talk of communications and accountability. Now, a quick reflection on today, talking about communication as it is with that equals trust. So I'm going to go ahead and clear out these slides real quick. And again, if there's any of these slides that you want to have questions for later, just DM me. We'll share email addresses, and I will be more than happy to share these with you. Okay. So in reflection of today, these two. Leadership diagnostics, right? Communication plus accountability equals trust. And why does trust matter? I think it's important for me to read this again. Trust determines whether people follow you or just comply. Communication and accountability are the two levers that create trust. And without trust, performance becomes inconsistent and emotional. So reflect on today. Accountability, communication and accountability seems like the two easiest things to do to get trust, but they are the hardest ones, actually. Because when I'm out and I'm consulting with a business and talking to companies, or I'm in talking to employers and employees, the one thing that I hear consistently is, I wish we had better communication. And when I'm talking to the employers, I am telling them communication starts with you. If you don't have clear communication to your employees, then they're just going to follow suit with that. Because then you're starting to let your employees form their own answers, which don't misconstrue that, because when we give ownership to our employees to handle tasks, that's a different mindset. Now, if we are communicating a job task to our employees and we don't communicate that clearly, then we're going to leave the communication gaps up to them to fill that gap with. And depending on how long they may have been with the company, they may be able to properly bridge that gap, or they may not be able to. So if the task at hand does not get completed as they were expected to be, the first question I usually ask is right to the leader. Did you communicate your expectations clearly. I shouldn't say recently, but I worked with a company that the owners struggled with this. They could not communicate their expectations at all. And any expectations they did communicate got changed. So the consistency went right out the window. And what happens in those scenarios is then your business runs all over the place. There's no direction, there's no accountability, there's no trust factors. Your service goes to crap. Everything just it snowballs. So when we set clear expectations, we emphasize the word clear. So we want to make sure that the expectations that we are setting for our employees are clear expectations and they're consistent expectations, and we don't deviate from that. That's where the consistency part comes in. If we are communicating an expectation, but then we change that expectation later, we're not being consistent. That's why if we do have a change, I'm not saying you can't change your expectations, but you need to communicate that change immediately. Because what happens then is now you have a team that you have some individuals going this way and you've got some individuals going this way, and then you have a goal at hand that never gets reached. And then what happens with underperforming leaders is then they start holding all of these people accountable because they didn't reach the job task that was set in front of them. When in fact, it's because the leader themselves either changed the expectations, they weren't clear they weren't clear in communicating those expectations, and or they were making wrong decisions, and they were holding their teams accountable for their decisions that they were making. So, in closing today, and I know I said that before, communication plus accountability equals trust. I always want to say trust, but it's trust. I thank you for whomever's still here and still watching. If we have any questions, by all means, go ahead and throw them up on the comment board now. If you don't have any questions, that's totally fine. If you think of ones later, you can DM me right through TikTok. We'll share email addresses and we can communicate back and forth. So for tomorrow, we're going to have day 2 of this, and we're going to talk about what that means to communicate to our team members. So thanks for tuning in today. We're right at 30 minutes. A little bit shorter than what I like to have these, but we communicated very clearly today. So again, thanks for tuning in. And if you missed today's episode and you want to tune in and watch this episode, just go to my YouTube channel, The Business Mechanic. It should be on my profile, and if not, just go ahead and DM me and I'll make sure to get that over to you. So in closing, let's be kind and let's get to work. We'll see you guys on the next one. Talk soon.